Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment in our UXDX online series. I hope you're as excited as I am for our talks today. But before we jump into that, I want to give a very quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these sessions. So at UXDX, our mission is to help companies shift from building software using waterfall, or more commonly in companies, water scrumfall, to truly empowered autonomous teams. Now, the reason why that's our mission is because in a high change environment, it's a more effective, efficient, and sustainable way of working. So what do I mean by that? In the past, when you might have one or two projects, it made sense. Build a team, work on something, disband the team, and move them somewhere else. Whereas now, a lot of the companies I work in, there's literally hundreds of projects going on at any given time. So in that situation, it makes more sense to have people who really understand a sliver of the product. They understand the customer needs, they understand the business goals, and they can keep iterating and really becoming experts in that part of the product. Now that's easy to say, not so easy to do. And that's where these talks come in. So no talk is going to talk about the entire product delivery lifecycle because that's just too large. But we ask people to share about how they're improving their practices on their kind of section of the process. And hopefully you can get some thoughts and ideas when you're listening to this on how you can improve or apply those kind of learnings in your context. So that's where the questions come in. So you can put questions in UXDX in the chat box there if you're watching from UXDX, or on whichever social platform that you're watching on, and we'll monitor and collate all of those questions and we'll pass them through to the speakers. And sometimes we don't have time to get through all the questions that come in, and that's where the UXDX community Slack group comes in. So we'll post any questions we don't have in the Ask the Speakers channel, and we'll invite the speakers to come and answer your questions there as well. But that's enough about me. You're not here to listen to me to talk. Unfortunately, Jide has had to drop out at the last minute, but we will be jumping straight ahead into Divya's talk. So Divya Tak is the co-founder at Joyus, and she'll be talking about 10 lenses for creating a better product. So I'd like to welcome Divya to the stage. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, everyone. So, I hope. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Hi.
no, we
So,
can hear you perfectly, so it's over to you.
yeah, awesome. Okay, so hi, I'm Divya, and I am a product designer, a podcaster, game designer. I make art also. And I have a background in physics. And one of the things that has been the best about sort of coming from physics and then moving into design and like learning a lot by myself and working on a lot of different things is you get to learn how different domains see things differently. And of course, because problem statements in each domain are unique, so you have specialized lenses that you will use to solve for those. But sometimes these lenses can be used in other domains. And I have found that some of the things that I learned in game design have really helped me evolve my product thinking. Similarly, some of the things that I learned while making products have helped me make better games. Um, or how podcasts have helped me think about storytelling, how art has helped me think about what is my vision. And so I put together this thing just so that I can bring some structure to some of those lenses that I often use when I'm having conversations with the people I'm working with and when I'm building my own things. Okay, so let's jump right in. So the first lens is from physics. Velocity is not speed. Um, the core concept is that velocity is a vector, which means that it has two things. One is a direction and one is a magnitude, and speed just has a magnitude. Um, and oftentimes, when we are building things, we can mistake magnitude for moving in the right direction. But sometimes, even a smaller magnitude, as you can see on the arrows on the right hand side, they're smaller in magnitude, but because they are aligned together, you can move further in the same direction. And how I often apply this thing in practice is when I'm building a product, I ask myself, is the user engaging a lot? And then what is the quality of that engagement? So, like, let's say you have built a product and you have created an amazing onboarding. People are going through all of the different steps. Are all of the steps cumulatively adding towards building into the user learning, okay, these are the points when I would be using this product, or are they just doing the steps because they are doing the steps? Are they running too fast nowhere, or are they actually moving in a particular direction? And these are the questions that help me answer if I'm looking at things as speed or velocity. In all of these lenses, I will have some questions at the end that I use. And of course, you can think about your own questions, and depending on what your product is, that will vary. I generally work with B2C products, and I generally work with more early stage products. So that also changes how I apply these things. But yeah, um, the next lens is one from psychology, which is, what's your empathy blind spot? So in psychology, you have a lot of different personality models to understand who you are, how you behave, how you act in any particular situation. Um, I'm using the Big Five model, which is the most popular one, called Ocean. It has five different scales: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. It scales you across six factors within each one of these, and puts different markers on, okay, are you open to new experiences, or are you very close off to new experiences? Are you highly conscientious? Are you low conscientious? Are you highly extroverted? Are you introverted? High agreeableness, disagreeableness, low neuroticism, high neuroticism. Now this is where I am at. I'm very open. You will find this actually in a lot of creator domains, that like openness to experiences is a very high scaling thing. And very interestingly, neuroticism, for example, is highly correlated with intelligence. But this is like a model, and these are my markers on where I stand on each one of these traits. Um, means that I don't understand the reverse of it. Those are my blind spots. So, for example, if I'm trying to design a product, I will be very easily able to design something for someone who has a very high openness, but I don't think I'll be as easily able to imagine for low openness. And of course, it's not going to be easy to have like emotional empathy, but just pointing it out and just looking at this, how will a user who has low agreeableness react to this product versus how will a user who has high agreeableness react to this product? Agreeableness is actually a very good one to think about, because if you are somebody who is like hostile to instructions, you might feel other users are also hostile to instructions, and you might not be able to design a product that would work more with highly agreeable users, and vice versa. Same with like extroversion. How much stimulus do you like in situations, and how much stimulus do other people like in the same situation? And the reversal of your spot is your blind spot, and just thinking about that is very helpful, at least to me. When I'm think about it, okay, this is a behavior that comes naturally to me. If I was low extroversion, how would I go through the same product? If I was on conscientiousness, how would I go with this product? If I was low on neuroticism, how will I go through this product? And you might have different models that you are utilizing. Some people use MBTI. There are a lot of other models, but just thinking about what is the reversal of my behavior and what would those people act like can really add a lot of empathy and richness to what you're building. um, this is in math, you know how if you multiply something by zero, everything else that came before it just goes to zero. um, or you can also call it like it's a critical system breaking error. What I have found is like oftentimes you will design, because designing a product, building a product is a very long chain. A lot of things need to happen for the user to have an excellent experience. Sometimes we miss out on these small things, and that can really lead to a breakage, regardless of whatever effort has gone in, regardless of what the quality of everything before it is. It doesn't matter. So for example, you could have great marketing, it targets the exact right user, sets them up for the right expectations, you have an amazing onboarding, but the way your home screen is set up, your key CTA is just hard to remember. People don't remember, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do here, or this is why I want to come here. The user will not return. Like at that point, you will see a major drop. And sometimes it's just important to think about, okay, am I actually doing anything that is reducing all of my efforts to zero? Um, so yeah, Is there any point in your system that makes everything that comes before it worthless? It's just useful to think about it, especially when you're looking at your product as a whole, or when even if you're looking at your part as a whole. It can be useful to think about, okay, if I'm designing this part and somebody else is designing this part, when they come together, is there any point in this where something towards a later point negates everything that came before it? Um, the fourth lens is one that comes from chemistry called activation energy. So any you might have heard, actually I'm unsure, but like you might have heard or remembered from your chemistry class that all chemical reactions require activation energy, but some elements are highly reactive, like oxygen is highly reactive, chlorine is highly reactive, sodium is highly reactive. But despite however highly reactive something might be, there is some activation energy that is needed. Um, so it is useful to think about when you want your user to do anything, even if it is a very small action, they will need some activation energy. It can be something like, oh, this looks shiny. Oh, this makes sense. Oh, this feels like the natural thing here to do. Oh, they understood what I am trying to do. But like just asking, okay, will the user require any activation energy and how high? Of course, we all think about things where the user has to do a large action or has to do a difficult action or has to do a conscious action. We generally try to counter and add activation energy there, but it's also useful to think about it in like small sort of spaces, and in small sort of actions. So like what I think about once I have designed a flow is just like, okay, what actions do I want the user to take, and what would be the activation energy that would be required for each one of those actions. um, okay. This is the first game design lens that we are discussing. And a lot of my learnings are from game design. And while fundamentally game design and product design can seem like they are both creating digital products, it's very interesting how different they are. So, because game design is very centered around fun, there are a lot of systems that are around how to make your fun better, denser, richer. Um, so one thing that I have found, which is like a very short and sweet learning, which is be brutal with what is fun. Um, and how I implement is remove bottom 30%. So if I'm making games, I would remove the bottom 30% of the levels. I try things out, whatever is engaging, whatever isn't engaging. Like I list it out and remove the lower half. Not lower half, but yeah, the lower third. Um, it's often very tempting to, especially when I have worked on products, it's often very tempting to keep adding features, keep adding new things, and never like remove the old things. And what that ends up doing is like that leaves a lot of long tail behavior where some of the people are using some of the features some of the times, but it dilutes the emotional connection that people have with you and your product, and probably not the thing that you want. So just thinking about like, what are the features that are least engaging? Some of them might be essential, but are how essential are they? And what can you remove can be a very useful heuristic. Of course, maybe 30% is too harsh a number for a product that's already in use, but like you can just keep thinking about how can you, with every second cycle or every third cycle, how can you revise things and how can you just clean up stuff that is no longer being used. um, this one is availability bias and hedonic treadmill. So, availability bias says that when something is in front of us quite often, we will be able to recall it quite quickly. So anything that like that's why marketing shows ads again and again. That's why people say that you have to be exposed to a brand n number of times, you have to be exposed to a concept n number of times before you can internalize it, because what you're checking for is availability bias. Of course, if you have like seen something months back, it might not be as on top of your mind as something that you might have seen yesterday's. um, and same thing with exposure is hedonic treadmilling. So the more often you see something, the lesser the emotional impact is. So when you are building something, it's very useful to think about this curve where if I'm being exposed to a stimulus for the first time, it's probably, and it needs to hit emotionally. It's probably going to hit emotionally hard the first time, and the value of that will decrease. So the delight that your user might get from like a singular interaction that you have very beautifully designed, it might be the highest the first time, and after some time they'll just get used to it. um, but the more frequently they're exposed to something, the more they're going to remember it. So it's very useful to think about, okay, which feature falls in which category, or which part of my experience falls in what category. Where do I need to pace myself, and where do I need to just like lay it out there, because I don't need the emotional component here. I just want people to remember this thing. So yeah, asking yourself what behavior needs to be remembered and what needs to feel impactful is super useful. um, This is a concept from mathematics called where is your maxima. So, maxima and minima are regions where any function takes maximum value or minimum value, right? Um, so, if you look at this graph, you have a lot of different maximas, right? If this was your entire region, there are 6 different points where there are maximas. But in design, in product design, what I have seen is you'll generally get stuck in a particular region, and your iterations can only bring you up towards that maxima. So if I am in the bottom, like in the rightmost part, what will happen is I'm probably going to iterate my way to the peak, but I can only iterate my way to this peak. I can never iterate my way to the global peak. And this is why sometimes when people are designing things from 0 to 1, there is a tussle where somebody thinks, no, we need to go in this direction, and another person thinks we need to go in this direction. And if one person suggests, oh, let's just iterate and test it out, the other person, like, the person who is opposed to that idea is like, no, but that wouldn't solve it. And this is my understanding of why that wouldn't solve it, because when you're choosing the region, it's very hard to figure out just via iterations, are you even in the right region? How do you even test for it? Um, so when you are stuck in a problem and iteration isn't solving things, it's very useful to think about, am I stuck in a local maxima? Um, and one of the solutions that I have found from this comes from, if anybody has played the game Civilization, it's this quote is from Sid Meier, who was the designer of Civilization, Civ 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He says that when you're designing any system, don't try to, especially initially when you figure out, okay, this is where the error is coming from, don't try to go for, oh, I'll change it by 5%, I'll change it by 10%. Don't make that small changes, like double it or half it, because that will give you actually the direction of, oh, do I need to decrease or do I need to increase? Only then should you start iterating. um, because iterations only move you in small steps, just like we discussed in the maxima conversation. So now here, for example, if you are, this is your original area, if you double it, it goes into a different region. If you half it, it goes into a different region. And like this will give you the right quote unquote direction to move towards. An example of this is, sometimes, let's say you have a menu, and you have a menu with like 5 options, and one person says, oh my god, 5 are too many, and you do 4. Does that really give you an idea of was 4 the right amount or not? I would doubt that it gives you clear data. And a lot of this, these two lenses are about getting crisp and clear data about what is the right direction to move in, so that you can iterate even better. And like halving it. So, for example, if you have 5 options and you just give 2 options, is the incidence rate, does the does the interaction rate increase for both of those options by a significant amount, or is it like such a minor change that you realize, oh, okay, it's not the number of options that is. um it's easier to implement some of these things in particular solutions. So like here, if you were building a strategy game, it would be very easy. Change the, if you're thinking, oh, 10 is too many tiles, let's make the tiles 5. Is it moving the game in the right direction? Or, let's increase the tiles to 20. And like, is that making the game better? What kind of gameplay is emerging? Of course, in context of games, this applies differently, but I have found that in especially in the micro design spaces for my products, this technique really works in clearing out what can be solved by iteration and what needs to be changed up completely. um, so yeah, the question you can ask is minor iteration going to give you a clear answer for your hypothesis? um, this is the ninth lens coming from psychology, but I have seen it much more in context of making games. It's the learning loop. So when you encounter anything, you have a mental model of it. This is what this thing is. um, then you take an action, right? Like, let's say I look at my mic, right? And I have a mental model. Oh, this is a mic, it has some buttons. Then I might, like, connect it, start speaking. There's an impact. I, like, something gets recorded, and the feedback is then I can hear and change the settings in my mic. Now, what this loop results in is I have a mental model, and by acting and getting the feedback, seeing the impact and like getting the feedback from that action, I can update my mental model. You can have the, oh, my mental model was correct and I can reinforce it, or my mental model was wrong and I can evolve it. um, this is like how learning happens. You encounter a problem, you take some action, you think, oh, it's going to be solved like this. And you realize, did it or did it not? You just sort of, rotate through that. What is interesting about this entire thing is that you realize people are constantly evolving. So often when we are designing for users, when we are designing for personas, we think, okay, this is the person, this is why they're going to come. And we don't think about, okay, how is each and every interaction with my product going to change their behavior? The first time a person comes to your product is very different from the third time they're going to come to your product, and from the 10th time they're going to come to your product. And it's very useful to think about, okay, how can I design for an evolving customer? And they're thinking about what actions will they take, what impact will that have on the system, and then what feedback are they getting so that they can update the mental model. The relationship between I took this action and so it did this gives you clear feedback. Sometimes when users are asking, I don't know why that happened. What did that do? That is when you have a feedback problem or an impact problem. And it's useful to categorize those questions in those ways. And like if you can fit that into the model, you can try to design your product in terms of a user who is like evolving through each interaction. This is hard. Like, this is not how most product design is done, at least like whatever I've experienced. This is not how it's done. It's also impossibly hard when you're trying to make games, because it works when you have a linear experience. Products are not so, but it's useful again in small snippets. And I've been able to use this. I've been able to construct like more robust behavior loops for people. um, and the last lens is the lens of play, of course. So in the last lens we talked about, in the previous lens we talked about learning, and learning happens through play and it happens through story is we look at other people, mistakes they've made, and we learn from that. Play is when we do things, not in a space of stress, not in a space of threat, but in a space of, I wonder what will happen here. I'm doing things just because. um, and one of the benefits of making products is products are interactive, and interactive things are inherently fun. Like, people like to be engaged, people like to do things. Um, and it's very useful to just think from the perspective of, how could I add something that is playful and like leverages the interactive side? So one example here is, this is a wireframe of a design that I did. So almost every product that you encounter will have some of those, like, these are 5 slides of the introduction of our product. But what we did here was, we had an analogy of, this was a mental health product, and for self improvement oriented, and we were trying to build this idea of, this is going to be challenging, this is going to be hard, but we will support you, but it will feel like climbing a mountain. And the interaction here is you sort of put your hand on the ball and you drag it upwards. You don't sort of slide through different slides, you just drag the ball upwards, and at some point there is a tiny dot that represents the product that comes up, and you climb to the top. The interesting thing was whenever we showed this thing to people, they were so enthusiastic. They really remembered this part of the onboarding. And they were like, oh my God, that was so fun. And I realized, oh, this is what's happening. And I've never seen that before. And that made me realize, especially coming from like somebody who makes a lot of games, how little playful interaction exists in the realm of products, and how much space there is to add more and more of those. So just asking yourself, like, can I add a playful element somewhere in this interaction, somewhere in this sequence, somewhere in this flow, would be like really, it would really elevate how your user experiences your product. All right. So thank you. That was me. And you can find me online on these places, and I'd be happy to have questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Divya. That was a stunningly beautiful presentation, as well as very good on content. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just a reminder for everybody, if you have any questions, please post them either on UXDX, the website there, or on any social platform that you're watching on, and we'll pass those questions through to Divya. But while you're thinking of your questions, I'd like to start off by, like, I thought the blind spots one was really kind of enlightening, because it's kind of highlighting that you don't see the inverse. But how are you supposed to empathize with people when you don't? So I know you talked through some kind of tactics, but particularly if I'm looking at that, the example you gave of being more cooperative, I think it was the word you used. How do you recommend that people kind of try to snap out of their inbuilt biases?
So I can give a personal experience from like, so my game design personality is like on the cooperative to competitive side. I'm very much on the cooperative side. I do not like to be competitive. So like if I am designing things where I want to create multiple players in a system, what I can think about is I can naturally think, okay, when everybody works together, this is what will happen, because that comes empathetically to me. But if I say, okay, so I would take this action if I was trying to help this person. What if I did not take this? What if I did the reverse? Like, how would the game sort of accommodate for that? What happens when I'm trying to break the system rather than trying to work with the system? So, just like whatever is my instinct, inverse of that, and like what happens. Of course, it's like that's why I said it's a very hard exercise to do, but just like doing it a few times at least helps me design better.
Brilliant. Yeah, I always like when people kind of, they say, how would you, if you were a bad actor, how would you use this in a negative way instead of
Yeah.
positive? And then the local maxima, like I love the kind of the graphic and the example. How do you get, because I've read as well, okay, you want your experiments to fail, you want them to be so challenging that if they actually pass, then that's a really good sign that something's happening. But how do you, if you're a designer and you're trying to pitch this to a team, they might be saying, no, that's a bit too extreme, like your example of let's have it, or like, so what happens if we do that and it goes bad? So how do you try to encourage people to take that step or take that risk?
Um, so there are two parts to this. Thankfully, I have worked in small teams with people who it's been easy to explain some of these concepts to. But generally, even when I was working with like slightly larger teams, what has been useful is just like first sitting and helping people understand the theoretical framework that I'm trying to go for. It's very difficult to convince someone, oh, I'm doing this because it's my taste, or I'm doing this because I feel like it. Then nobody wants to go with you. But like if I can explain, okay, this is the theoretical framework that I'm trying to use, most of the times people are willing to give it a shot, especially if you are willing to sort of also accommodate their frameworks, because that's what's going to happen. If you bring something up, they will be like, no, but I'm thinking about it like this, and just being adaptive at that moment. That's also how a lot of these things have formed. I worked with people who had different models, and then okay, how can I incorporate their model within what I am doing and refine my thinking? um, so I guess like rather than trying to think about conversion or convincing someone, I think about, okay, this is how I can elaborate and explain to you why I'm doing this, and then what do you think about it? I can't
Yeah,
hear you.
sorry, that's a great kind of suggestion and model for people. So Um, Great. If you do have any other questions out there, please just keep posting them in, and we'll put those onto the UXDX community Slack group. But I think that brings us to time now. So I just want to thank you, Divya, for sharing all of your insights.
Thank you so much. It was
Brilliant.
really lovely.
Excellent. So up next, we have our next speaker for today, who is Jide Pinheiro, who is a product designer at Umba. So I'd like to welcome Jide to the stage. Welcome, Jide. Hello, I can't hear you at the moment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now. So over to
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Hi guys. My name is Jide. I listened to quite a bit, and yeah, it was it was quite insightful. Her position on I saw a lot of detail in how to execute better products, and it's really interesting. I have like a sort of different way of expressing what I feel about products. So I'll just go through the presentation, and then at the end of the day, if you guys have any questions for me, um, we could share it. So I hope it's okay. Okay, it's showing the right screen now. So hi everybody. My name is Jide Pinheiro, and I'm just taking through the slides that I presented for my concept of feeling forward. Um, a little note, it might not be as product heavy as the last speaker, but then it's still following the same line of thinking and line of logic. So, in a world where we aspire for the best experiences and build out the best products, we're a lot of times distracted by mistakes, bad judgments, unexpected setbacks, and everything in between. There's a lot of stuff that comes in the way. I'm Jide Pinheiro. I'm a product designer, creative director, and architect. Over the next few minutes, I'll be talking to you about how to use those mistakes and then those errors, those losses in your favor and move forward with them as it helps build you and build character and make your brand come out strongly. I'll be walking through quite a few steps, a few strategies that you could go through, and my general thoughts about the whole process. So, how to build better? Nike is a benchmark for great sports products. It's won by celebrities, athletes, and just everyday people. With its craftsmanship and its design and user experience, it ranks as one of the top brands out there in the world, alongside brands like Apple, Coca-Cola, Adidas, Tesla, ChatGPT, and probably even the likes of Twitter until you know the recent debacle that they're facing right now. With this, it's a fantastic product out there in the market, but then what a lot of people don't realize is that it had a lot of testing, it had a lot of iterations, it had a lot of things that had to go through it for it to become the brand that it is. Behind every success story, there's always a ton of hard work, trials, tests, failures. It's just the way things go. There's a lot of failures, there's a lot of losses that happen along the way. But then, what are the commonalities, and then how can we use those commonalities to make a great product, a great individual, or a great company? First of all, we want to make a few definitions. Let's just do like a basic definition of failure. A philosopher says, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail again, fail better. Now, one might be asking, what does feeling better actually mean? In the case of Nike, for example, fail better likely means embracing a culture of experimentation and learning through failure. By investing heavily in research and development, Nike is able to try out new ideas and technologies and iterate them until they get it right. However, this process involves a lot of setbacks along the way. Fail better, in this case, encourages the company to view these failures not as defeats, but as opportunities to grow and improve. By learning from these mistakes and continually innovating through their research and through trials, Nike is able to stay at the forefront of the athletic wear industry. And the same can be said about other areas of your life. The more trials you go through, if, for example, if, for example, you think through some of the experiences that you've gone through in your personal life or your relationships or your careers, you'll find that they follow the same process. They have a lot of setbacks, they have a lot of things happening at the same time. So, what is very important is to try and find a way of moving through those things. But we're going to discuss that. It's very important that we know how to react when those issues come around. So this is the typical scenario. So you have avoidance, you have denial, and then you have blame. A lot of times, many successful individuals and companies react certain ways, which hinder otherwise beneficial components of learning from mistakes and learning from your losses or your failures. There's always a conversation about, well, nobody actually likes this. A lot of people are usually scared of how the product might feel or how the product might look or how what things you're trying to say might sound, and so there's a lot of avoidance. The second thing a lot of people do is to try and rationalize. They try and rationalize the failure to protect their self-esteem because as humans we don't we some people claim not to be emotionally attached to things, but deep down inside we are. And then blame, that's the third component. And a lot of times, because you don't want to be associated with some certain loss or failure, you eventually try and find a way of winning this off into the world or into the universe. You try and say, this is a factor beyond my control. So I think it's very important to know how to react in these situations. A little bit about me, for example. I think many of the things that I'm talking about and my idea of failing forward comes from my work background. I'm a very introverted person. I like to keep to myself. I have my special interests. I have things that I'm actually concerned about. I I delve a lot into a lot of geek lore, and I think that shaped some of the things that I found very interesting in life. A lot of times, as I was younger, a lot of times I thought that for a product to be successful, it needed to be perfect. And thankfully, over years of me doing work, I've learned that it doesn't work that way. There is nothing like the most perfect, the most beautiful products in the world. And so, in trying to achieve that perfection, I was always scared of if it was not perfect. So, it turned into a huge fear, and I never left anything as it was at any point. I just always tried to strive to perfection up to a point that was a little detrimental. So, I can share this document to you guys later, but it just outlines some my motivations, challenges, and then goals, and then skill levels. So here was my reality. A lot of times that I had a lot of rejections. For the last few years, for example, I have been doing a lot of freelance stuff. That was before I entered my 9 to 5, and there were a lot of rejections. You didn't even need to open the email. You would just say, "Thank you for applying. We have decided to go with someone else." A lot of times that affects my perception of success and failure. Another thing that impacted me along my journey over the last 5 to 10 years was creative blocks. Now, this happened in two ways. There's an overabundance, for lack of better words, of information, or an underabundance because you're trying to stand out, you're trying to um, break out from the crowd. And so, a lot of times, what you find out that is that you don't know what to do, and not knowing what to do eventually makes you question the idea of whether what it is they are doing is successful or whether it's a failure. The third thing, which is, I think it happens, for example, a lot in the creative industry also, is self doubt. But even outside the creative industry, is thinking that what you're doing is never good enough. Everything is going to eventually amount to nothing. And this was my reality at some point. And over a while, I think with continually making mistakes, with finding out how people fail, to find out that I wasn't the only person that felt this way, it actually inspired me to break my mindset out of that thinking. I must admit that I'm still learning. I think everybody is still learning eventually. And I'm still in some areas, I still lack my ability to break out of some of these things. But then, for the most part, I think one of the most important thing is that I'm aware of these things in the first place. And this is how I judge the world. And it really affected my work. Now, I'm going to dedicate like maybe one or two slides to actually talking about the work that I do, but I felt that this was a lot more close to the heart because it expressed a lot of what it is that I was trying to convey. Because I think we're individuals that work with companies, that have careers, that have relationships where we're humans first. And as a human being, if you're not able to sit down and say, this is who I am, these are my flaws, these are my weaknesses, and these are my strengths, and then use that to build a structure for your life, then every other thing that you're working on will be impacted. So there are three areas also, as said in the previous slide. There's avoidance, there's denial, and then there's blame. Avoiding acknowledging
Sorry,
mistakes.
sorry,
Can
Jide,
you hear
sorry
me?
to jump in.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure whether you were saying a story or sharing slides, but the slides aren't moving. They're not
The slides
moving.
aren't moving at all?
No, I thought it was that you were giving a kind of a more story style
Oh,
presentation. Apologies for not jumping in earlier.
oh, that is weird.
There we go. I think it's moving now. Apologies for disrupting your flow.
Oh, let me just take you through the visuals again, just really quickly. And so we start off, and I initially spoke about Nike, for example, and how you might see something outside, and then you find out that there's a lot that goes into building a great product. That's the first slide. And then we went into definitions. Definitions is trying to find out um, how to feel better, basically. And then we look at a few case studies. We find out how we define failure or success in your personal life, in your business life, in your careers, in your relationship, with your religion, with your health, your with your with your gender, with your with your ethnicity, and all that. They all follow the same process or line of thought around this is what it takes to be successful, and this is what it takes to be a failure in this thing. But then those failures do not necessarily define you. Those failures actually help build you up. And then I moved into how we react, because it's very important to know how to react. If you Everything can go all perfect at the same time. There are some times where things are not going to go as you initially planned them, and so we need to reset our minds to understand that we need to have a different reaction, a different feeling once we see those failures. In this scenario, for example, there's avoidance, there's denial, and there's blame. Avoidance is like painful and humiliating, and you do not want to be associated with it at all. Denial is always trying to rationalize why things are failing to protect your self-esteem, and then blaming others is just a way of deflecting your behavior as somebody else's problems. And there's a way to react. So there's a small deep dive, and I think this deep dive is you also try to find a way of creating your persona. You create your persona and say, this is who I am, this is what motivates me, these are my challenges, these are my goals, and these are my skill sets. And then using that, it forms like a sort of framework. By the time you're able to analyze that properly, I think it helps you in building yourself as a better individual. And that also automatically helps you in your relationship with others because of your newfound perspective. And it helps you build better teams, it helps you build better bonds, and then obviously it helps you build better products. And then I mentioned about my reality. My reality had a lot to do with rejection, my creative blocks, and self doubt. Now, addressing those things differently, rejection, everyone knows what rejection feels like, or a lot of people know what rejection feels like. There are a few that are privileged, but then a lot of people know what it is to be rejected. If you're trying to apply for a job, for a new role in a company, if you're trying to apply for anything, basically, there's a feeling that you get, and there's a feeling that you get after, because you are scared that if you continue doing this thing, you might fail again. And then there's creative block, which means that you are in a certain place and you cannot move, almost quite literally, some people even physically, because they are scared of of the outcome of that motion, because they don't have enough information, or there's an information overdrive. And then the self doubt is pretty much the trying to be perfect. Uh, in your trying to be perfect, a lot of people that try to be perfect are scared of failure. And if you understand that this is your reality, then it's easier for you to find a way of fixing those problems. And then I said, okay, this is how I judge the world. So there's avoidance, there's denial, and then there's blame. Avoidance is trying to say, well, I didn't make any mistake. And so there's probably no need for improvements of that mistake. And the denial is trying to minimize your failures, and I'm failing to acknowledge or learn from those mistakes. And then blame, as said in the earlier slides, is always trying to move everything in a direction that is outside yours. Now, there's quite a bunch of stuff that I learned. It's a few of them are about counting failures, about resilience, and about innovation. Now, I don't know if you guys can see the thumbnails there. An inspirational mindset from a somewhat controversial person is SpaceX, for example. Elon Musk talked about the failure of his spaceship, and he said that it was actually a good thing. And a lot of people from the outside will reject that notion. It's reasonable to reject it, because why are you failing? But it is also reasonable to accept it, because why not fail to and then learn from those mistakes, as creating something that is a little novel. It's a little different from the obvious. So there are going to be errors, there are going to be mistakes. And so how do we find a way of learning from them? Counting failures. Build on what you have, build on the products that you have, build on the app, build on the shoe, build on the business idea that you have, build on the concepts that you're working on, build on a relationship in your personal lives, build on your relationship with your family, with your loved ones. And it's best to understand that nobody is perfect. In all these scenarios, there are always going to be failures, but you build on and you try again. You embrace the fact that, for example, clients don't like your work. You embrace the fact that if a new feature, for example, that you had planned out didn't come to fruition, that you didn't make a certain amount of money in a particular year, that you have creative blocks, you accept the fact that you've not been able to balance your personal life and your work life. It's very important that you accept those things, because it helps build a stronger character. And then innovation. Failure can and in a lot of times, if you're open-minded enough, can lead to new ideas and breakthrough innovations. From post-it notes to penicillin to there's a bunch of examples out there. where a lot of people, to the first flights, for example, where a lot of people just experimented with stuff, kept on failing, like with the brothers, kept on falling and falling, or with Edison and the light bulb. They kept on trying. Right now, I think a lot of people at that point had seen them as mad scientists because we were just out there and they were just being resilient and then just keep on trying new ways to fix things. But then it's very important that you open your mind out to the failure because that is part of what breeds innovation. Okay, so my strategy is a three-pronged strategy. So it's change, focus, and feedback. Very important is to try and find a way of changing your mindset. You see failure as a natural part of a learning process and an opportunity for growth. A lot of people don't see it that way, but it's very, very important that you try and change that mindset. And then focus. You focus on the process, you emphasize the effort and the progress rather than the outcome. A lot of people are so stuck on the outcome that they forget how they got there. And then you share feedback. You don't work in isolation, work with people around you. You can always learn from people around you. So, finding success, build on the knowledge while you're learning, build on the knowledge from your mistakes, have a more open mind, and be more confident. As regards products, for example, which I, I, I won't call it saved, but I just put it as a back burner in this presentation, is to keep on testing, you keep on prototyping, and you keep on collaborating. So if you can see, it's pretty much like a mirror of your personal life and then your professional life or your business life. If you follow this type of attributes, I think you'll find success, which will make you feel forward. Um, I would like to give more detailed explanations to some of the stuff that I've done, but then this is what I might like to present first. So this was one of my clients. Before these clients, I had to crop out a bit of the screen because there are a ton of screens. It was a lot of stress initially. I wanted to give up so many times because I thought I had failed in trying to execute this. We had done like an elaborate thing of trying to merge different things together, different concepts. So I was brought in the later end of the project to try and fix a bunch of screens. I had no idea of anything that was happening. I got stuck at so many times. But then I just said, you know something, this small experience of having to design all these pages or designing a bunch of pages to try and find out all the information that I can about this small parts that I have in this big projects, a lot of times I just felt stuck. But then I thought about, you know, this could be beneficial. And a project as or my small contribution to a big project like like what I had enabled me to iterate a lot faster. I understood a lot of processes a lot better. And then it was easy. Initially, it was very difficult for me to execute some of them. But then over time, understanding that these things are going to be eventually beneficial to me was what enabled me, for example, when I started my work at the fintech company that I work with, which is Umba. It made me a lot faster and responsive to, for example, with Umba, there's a lot of data sets, there's a lot of dashboards, there's a lot of workflows that we need to consider. It made me iterate a lot faster. And so I didn't it was initially difficult, but then I tried to break myself out from that mentality of, this is eventually going to be a failure. And then I started trying to apply some of those techniques, and those are the things that have helped me in any of my pursuits these days. Conclusion. So embracing failure can lead to learning, resilience, and innovation. Building on lessons to create successful products, run better products, and be a more wholesome person, because it is even bigger than just your product. It's you as an individual. It enables you to grow, learn, communicate. That confidence inspires self-love and then self-care. Main takeaway: change your mindset, focus on the process, seek feedback, and apply fail forward strategy in UX design, in design, in engineering, in project management, being a founder, apply the same principles of thinking of the benefits of failing, and you have a successful product. Embrace failures as opportunities and try and connect with people around. So that's pretty much my presentation. There are a few references for you to go through after, and then we could obviously share. And then if you have any questions, we could discuss that at a later point.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jide. That was a really kind of open and honest running through of failings and failing forward.
Yes.
Excellent. My first, so if anybody has any questions, please do post them on whichever platform or whichever channel that you're watching on, and I'll put those questions through to Jide. But one thing that I wanted to kind of start with, because I'm a big advocate in that you learn from your failures, like that kind of kids, just watching how kids learn is just, it's kind of try again. But in business, there can often be a stigma about that. And people are trying to put their best image forward that, like, I'm a professional and I know what I'm doing. So do you have any advice for people on how they can kind of try to do what you've just advocated of being raw and honest and failing, but maybe be careful of the backlash, or what companies can do to encourage it?
Become a child. So as you get older, you think more. There's a lot more at stake. So I think it's very important that you find a way of finding your inner child. As cheesy as that sounds, I think it works very effectively. There's a stigma because, and I think it's a self-induced stigma because you've gotten to a point in your life where you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you're thinking unconsciously. It's not as if you actually wanted to restrict yourself or except it's an external factor. For example, like I've said with like in your workplace, a lot of times we have shrunk our abilities to expand our thinking and expand the way we view the world based on the fact that the world has happened to us. It has reduced the amount of innovation. It has reduced the amount of creativity. It has reduced the amount of let me try something this way. Let me iterate in another way. Let me try and code in another way. Let me try another methodology instead of probably like an agile or a scrum. It has reduced that thing because there's so many other things in play. There's the economy, there's your life experiences, there's your fear of the unexpected. So you rather keep to what it is that you know. So a lot of times, even as a corporation, which is obviously difficult because it's a loop because the companies actually need to make money, for example, which is paramount to many of these to businesses. That's the whole idea. But then your ability to think as a child, to say that there are no hindrances right now in my life is really important to how you express your ideas. And I think it's something that should be encouraged with both business owners, with startups, with venture capitalists, with government agencies. I think we are now at a crucial point in society where we need to unlearn some of those restrictions so that we can innovate further. I don't know. I think that sounds like a long explanation for a short question.
No, it's a great one. It's just I guess it might be challenging for some people to try to do it because you have that built in that you kind of try to protect yourself.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
But I think that brings us to time. So I really enjoyed that talk, and I hope everybody out there did as well. So thank you once again, Jide.
Yes, you're welcome.
So that brings us to the end of our event for today. But I hope you enjoyed the talks, and I hope you enjoyed the kind of concept of what we're trying to do, break down the barriers between product, UX, design, and dev so that we can work as a true product team. So on top of these online events, we also run conferences. Our next one is in 2 weeks in the USA, which is probably a little bit short notice, but we do also have one in October in Dublin, and it'll have 50 speakers, 2,000 attendees, 12 workshops. So it's a fantastic way to kind of learn how you can apply some of the things that we're talking about in these sessions. So I do hope you'll join us for those conferences, but if not, I hope we'll see you at the next UXDX online event. So just want to say thank you once again to our amazing speakers this evening, Divya and Jide, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you very much.